Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. Oh, so being that I was just wanting to just say, yeah, we don't need to talk about anything today. Because
Right. Yeah.
the weight of the topic, right?
Right.
And it's a
And
challenging one because it's so hidden in plain sight.
right. And I was trying to remember how we came around to it. I mean, I remember when we got there, but I can't remember what brought us to this. Maybe if I look,
I don't either, which is usually
maybe
funny.
if I look at my notes.
Yeah, I have my notes here.
Yeah. No. Well, we were
I can't even
talking
remember.
about talking about circumstances that brought us into that place of feeling like we were taking the higher ground.
Yes, that was it. That's what it was. Yes. Yes.
Taking the higher ground, and that we liked that. We liked that feeling of I'm being the bigger person. I'm being the right one. I'm in the right.
I'm more right than the other person or less wrong than the other person. Or, like you can put 50 different, titles on. Yes, because it has to do with, this page you and I both follow or whatever. And it was such a great summary of something that ended up being related to you that you've been looking at. And then I was like, well, obviously if it's related to you, then there's stuff related to me.
Well, and we like for instance in a conflict or an argument, and you feel that you have such a belief in what you believe passionately that you feel that you're right.
Yes.
And that society backs you up. The social norms back you up that, yeah, you're right, they're wrong.
Right.
And you like that because you like being right and you like being the righter one. And it's so rather than coming to a place of seeing their perspective, you just, no, I'm going to stay in my rightness.
And I'm going to also push you to be in my rightness too, because I'm righter than you. Right.
Right. And everybody else believes that too. So you really should just do this.
Right. Right. Oh, yes. And that's how it came to, because it was like, okay, so about the post that we had seen before that answer was about somebody who had, good morning, Yasmin, somebody who had, had this riff with their significant other, right? Where otherwise they said they had this great relationship with them and
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And they just had this one point where though they understood their SO's, different point of view, they didn't understand why they had it because they felt like, they were wrong. Their SO was wrong and they were right. And, usually we can just, agree to disagree, but, it really irks me. Like, and it just really irks me that, they won't come around, like basically that they won't come around. Right.
Right.
And
right.
I get so, and the person was talking about how I get so triggered and I don't know why I get so triggered because I can accept anything else about them. But I got so triggered that I was at their house the other night and left in the middle of the night and just left them a note saying I just got triggered and need to go home. And this is somebody, I think they had been in the relationship, I don't know, like 8 or 9 years. It's not like it's a new relationship. And it was like,
right.
I just, this one thing, and it was really a pretty nominal thing. Right. So this person had written back, which I thought was such a fabulous response was, well,
it
was, well, have you looked at why you, well, not just looked at why, but just have you just looked at that you enjoy your righteousness, you enjoy your feeling of being right.
And it's almost, and they didn't use this word, but I think of it as you enjoy being superior.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, because that's how we feel when we're righteous, right? As superior, and we condescend to others by saying you are not as right as me.
Right. And the other word that came up was sanctimonious.
Yes. Oh yeah. So yeah, yeah, we haven't even gone down this road yet. I have
Right,
3
right,
pages of notes from our discussion Friday.
right. But we that's why so many people today are into fact checking,
Yeah.
because it's all about showing that I'm right,
Right. Exactly.
which just perpetuates that me and not me,
Mhm.
that there can only be one right.
Of anything.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
That there can only be that one opinion. And the more we get on our side, the more right we become.
Right. Right.
Whether we're right or not.
Right. But then because we believe the more that we get on our side, the more right we are. Right. Because if
Right.
everybody believes that,
It must be true.
true.
Right. Right. And that brings me back to one of my favorite quotes is what's a lie told 20 times? The truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So, we started talking about that. And the funny part is we have built righteousness in as an insurance, a very hidden insurance that we convince ourselves is the way it is, right? Because we have integrated the idea that righteousness is a good way to be in religions, belief systems, and cultures, and spirituality. I mean, the whole I'm so spiritual, right? Doesn't matter if it's, the non I forget the word, but the non-religious spirituality,
Right.
or a religion, belief system, whatever. Like we started looking this up, right? You and I, when we were talking about this, and it's like, even, I mean, there's, not to pick, like, and I don't want to pick on the Bible but it's just one that so many people talk about. But I mean, there's verse in the Bible that justifies righteousness and says,
right. And I'm more familiar with that, so I feel more comfortable talking about the Bible versus another religious text that I'm not familiar with. But I mean, heaven is only for the righteous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we found the script, which I really don't like to quote scripture. So I'm just not going.
I know.
It's here written down. But it was like, so we have integrated it into now. And what I've said is all belief systems, the challenge that we've had with formal belief systems has been the ego's intervention. Right.
Right. Right.
And it has been the ego coming in and saying, okay, we have to have, by doing this, we have to create the righteousness of we're more right than everybody else, right? Because we have to have them all bow down to this. And then we have the power over these people in this population to impose our choice of what's right and what's wrong into their texts and everything else. And it's true. I mean, they've had councils and all kinds of stuff to decide, what are we putting in these books? What are we putting in these things? And we'll note this, and at different times and in different cultures, they've eliminated parts that gave too much power to certain parts of the population, like the females. And they've done a lot of stuff to manipulate it to be, and say, oh, well, see, it's in the book. It's in the book.
Right. Well, and I mean, even words, like I know when we were researching this, and the word righteous was derived from a Greek word, which I think had just a shade off of its definition, which didn't quite mean the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we've extrapolated everything on out to where, oh no, it's the righteous, and it's those that have earned it and judged and have been judged righteous.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And like the definitions that we saw, righteousness, the quality of being morally right or justifiable. Who decides who's morally right or justifiable?
Exactly.
If I do, then I'm no less righteous than you. So it's this whole thing that this is what we've perpetuated this entire density of separation and exclusion on, and justifying righteousness. I mean, it's like we've said, many of the, it's funny is many of the belief systems that talk about, blah, 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 morality and love and whatever, are the ones that have killed the most people in the name of God or the name of whatever, or Allah or whatever. It doesn't even matter what the name is. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's all like, and it's all in righteousness. Like, no, we're right and you're wrong. Because you're wrong, I can kill you and I can be justified in killing you because you're immoral and you're going to hell anyway. Right.
Right. Right. Well, and
Or whatever it's called. In
I
whatever.
say this all the time about, the story of the Garden of Eden and getting the knowledge of good and evil. Well, that's just judgment, which is what we're talking about here, is that righteousness, which is
The creation of righteousness. Yeah.
Right.
And judgment.
Right there.
So
Right there.
interchange it with judgment, because that's really all it is. Righteousness is judgment.
Absolutely.
And for us to really get to that expanded perception is to let go of judgment. That's what all of this the forgiveness course in our Adventures in Wonderland program is, right? Is really, that's what forgiveness and apology is about, is neutralizing judgments of all kinds.
Right. Absolutely.
Because it's acceptance, right? It's acceptance that it's all perfect. It's all part of the bigger picture, that everybody has their own truth, and that nobody is, that it is the way it works. And does it change? Constantly. Yet we blind ourselves so much because think of all the energy we get into, I'm right and that person's wrong, or I'm wrong and that person's right. And so therefore I'm a worthless POS kind of thing.
Right.
Right.
Well, and in your spiritual journey and in that seeking of that expanded consciousness, your guidance is, this is for me, but that doesn't mean that that's the only right way. It's like how many paths up the mountain there are.
You still get to the top. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yes. Exactly. And so it does creep into everything we do.
Yes.
Everything we do. Even, I read something about raising children and about teaching lessons. And if you use manipulation, or you tell your kid not to leave their bicycle out and they left it out anyway, so you take it just to teach them a lesson. And it's like, oh, but all you're teaching them is to lie and to manipulate to get what you want. And it's like, wow, it's just everywhere. And that doesn't mean that my way's the only way, or your way's the only way, or the government's way is the only way, or the church's way is the only way, or
whatever.
It's so personal and individual.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is, and then we look, because then sanctimonious came up as a synonym to righteous. Right. And I was like, oh, that word just makes me want to puke all the time. Right. And that definition was making a show of being morally superior to other people. Yeah. Right. There's my judgment. There's my righteousness right there.
That's right. 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 So, and I just really don't think that any of this was what any of this started out as.
Well, except, it's all perfect, right? So it's the road we chose. It's the road we chose to explore and discover. Right. And so, we go through all this. And so we talk about it in different words. So we talk about it in forgiveness. We talk about it in apology. We talk about it in acceptance, right? In terms of seeing things from, stepping back and observing, right?
Right.
We just haven't used the word righteousness before, because it's sort of like a smack in the face, but it is a legitimate smack in the face, because no matter how much we do this, there are hidden things that we have righteousness about, right?
Well, and if
when we say no judgment, but there's your righteousness, there it goes.
Right. So if we sit back and we say that everything is a mirror back to us about what's going on with us, it's that conflict within ourselves.
Yes.
Of what's right, what's wrong, what's better, what's worse, and then you get into It's all perfect. It's all divine.
Yeah. Well, and we do so much. We are so used to managing that righteousness and judgment that we have become blind to it within ourselves, right?
Right.
And or we justify it again by
Well,
quoting something, a book, a
and
scripture.
we've also given
people.
it a priority over our happiness, over our well-being in a lot of
Yeah.
cases,
Yep.
over things that we feel are not in our best interest, but it's the right thing to do.
The right thing. Yes.
Right.
And you're right. And the thing is to look at it and say, how much energy am I putting into holding this in my reality, right? Holding this energy of just because I love the feeling of that superiority that I get with this righteousness.
Right.
And so when you say that, from a place of consciousness, the ego goes, whoa, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh yeah, we just called you out on your stuff, man.
Exactly. And I find that even with as much introspection and as much self-work and as much uncovering as I've done, this one kind of came along and I was like, well, I don't know if I want to give that up or not.
Right.
I don't know if I'm comfortable here.
Right.
And that made me really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To come to that realization that was so embedded and was so comfortable that I didn't even realize it.
Yes. Yes. And
I've
I've
spent a lot of time wishing the other person would come to see it my way.
Exactly.
So that we all could just be comfortable.
So that we could all be righteous in our comfort.
We could just together. Can't you just see it my way? Can't you just see it society's way? Can't you just,
it's like,
can't you just look
I understand what you're saying, but can't you just see it this?
Right. I honor your journey, but
see, there's the odd. Oh, there's so much of it, and there's so much, and we laugh. It's a really deep one, and when we lick this one, we lick pretty much most of the challenges that hold us back.
Right. This is so embedded and ingrained and unconscious.
Yes.
That it's massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's because we decide, well, this person was in the right. Well, look at all that. And look at how we've created victimhood around it, right? Oh, well, this person was in the right. Look at like stories upon stories upon stories, right? Oh, well, look at what this person had. The poor person, they were implying they were in the right. And what was happening to them or what happened to them was in the wrong and the others were in the wrong. And then there's righteousness about that. It's just so much in that decision. And then it's like, well, how many people then will gang up on somebody or a group of people because they feel like, they were doing wrong based on today's morality, right?
Right. Well, I mean, even looking at history, it's just a record of righteousness.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
That it's just, this is how the story wraps around this righteousness and wraps around this righteousness and wraps around that. And I mean, that's just.
So the question starts to become then, how do we change that? Because it is so embedded, right? And you and I are very conscious about and observant to our own stuff.
Right.
And yet the more we started talking about it, the more I was like, oh, and then that's what I've been laughing about since we had this discussion. It was like, oh, well, look at I'm just enjoying my righteousness about that now, aren't I?
Right.
I'm just gonna sit with it. And you're right. We like it because why? It tells the ego I am better or I'm, valuable, right? Because I am better than somebody else. That's what the ego says.
And another way to look at it, which we talk a lot about this in worthiness as well as the forgiveness course, is that if I'm doing right, that makes me more lovable.
Right. Correct.
Which is a big fear of being unlovable or unloved.
Yes.
And if you're right, then that's a point, on that T chart on the plus side.
That's right. So when I die, there's going to be there's going to be the ticks up on the board, right?
Well, you go to the gates and you look at, have you walk the path of righteousness?
Yeah. And that's what we've decided, except, yeah, the thing is we let go. That's the thing. My understanding is we simply just let go of all of it as soon as we leave, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, there is ego outside of the physical body. There's plenty of ego outside, because I've seen righteousness in many spiritual forms, non-physical forms and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's why I always would say what I've said from the beginning has been, and what my guidance has been, is listen to your guidance and get really dependent on that inner guidance of the expanded consciousness, because no matter who comes to you, what facet of the divine, which is really just a facet of you,
Right.
comes to you to give you a message, if there's any tint of righteousness in there, right? If there's a name associated or an identity associated with it, there's an ego associated with that identity. And therefore the ego has some form of right and wrong, of this is right, this is wrong, blah, blah. So you should do this, you shouldn't do this. And that's what I was telling people, is when we get guidance and we hear that, even when we have see the face of some, what we consider the ultimate of ascended masters or whatever,
Right.
as soon as you hear in your mind or in your filter of understanding on you should, you have to, you can't, you mustn't, you must, that is all ego inserted, and it is all righteousness and judgment. And so that's the important part, is to step back and say, is this my truth? Is this what there is for me to do? Not what I should do. Is this what there is for me to do? Because many times I found I would get no. This is the nugget of what is there for you to shift in your translation.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's challenging.
I always come back to that phrase, namaste, is like the divine in me acknowledges the divine in you. And I think that eliminates all righteousness right there.
Yeah.
And that
it frees us.
If we truly live that, then there's no place for righteousness.
Correct.
But we have to even be aware that we're walking that path.
Well, and that's the biggest step. Because I mean, like I said, you and I are very conscious and observant to everything that we do and think and talk about. And then it was like, when we came across that, it was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Bummer.
And it's very well hidden. And there's a lot of it that has been dissipated over the years. I will say.
Absolutely.
There's a lot that's been dissipated, but there's still some there underneath.
Well, and given if you watch TV or if you read a newspaper or any kind of media, printed media, if you're on social media, it's there. It's there in spades, and you almost become numb to it or callous to it, but yet it still impacts you. And once you see it for what it is, it's really interesting.
Well, and the whole point
at that different level.
The whole point of that particular Yeah. And the whole point of that particular group where that comment came from is immersing yourselves in the shadow.
Right.
And admitting that we love the shadow. Right. And the aspects of the shadow that we deny or vilify or judge or have righteousness about righteousness.
Right.
And so it's okay. And that's the thing, like you said, what made you very uncomfortable was to think about how comfortable you were holding it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it really took me back to well, okay, so I'm not necessarily who I believe I am. And that was powerful.
Yeah. And then you just start to get to a different place of understanding your own observations, right?
Oh, yes.
But if,
Absolutely.
I mean, to me, this, this observation is a commitment to examining it straight on, like looking at it and saying, like you said, like, well, I really enjoyed that. I'm not
Right.
really sure I'm ready to let go of that.
Right.
And then the question to ask is, because there were some things that popped up over the weekend that I was like, oh, look at that little bit of righteousness underneath the surface, And then I was like, well, yeah, no, that one's pretty deep. And same thing, I'm pretty comfortable in that, even if it's a little speck, it's a little speck,
Right.
not even a
Right.
big one. It was just a little one that just is there in an undercurrent. Like almost
Right.
like I'm saving this one. This is like my this is like my little special piece of chocolate that I want to
Right. It's your
nibble on.
holdout, right? Yeah. It's your emergency stash.
I just want to nibble on in an emergency. Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
Well,
and
and I mean, if you truly aspire to live in your authenticity, there's no place for this.
right.
And I think that that's, and if you honor someone else's authenticity and believe that that is where the perfection is, then this doesn't, there's no place for righteousness, because essentially everyone's authenticity is right. It's their righteousness.
Exactly. Exactly. And then, many say, well, what if this person's immersed in their ego? All right, let's talk about it from a spiritual standpoint, right? What if this person just is immersed in their ego and that's all they do is ego, ego, ego? And it's like, well, then that's their choice. That's their journey, right? That's
Right.
not for us. And like many times we get more triggered by the people who are closest to us, right? On that. Right.
Right. Yep.
And so when we look at that, we're like, okay, so what happens if they do? All right, so they complete this journey, this particular embodiment, and they go through all of that. And maybe that was what they wanted to do. Maybe they wanted to go through an immersion into the ego at such a complete level that they would feel like they were saturated and satiated on
Right.
it
Right.
through this life. So who are you? Who am I to change that for them?
Or to even sit in judgment of their journey.
Exactly. Because even
Yep.
when we don't use the word righteousness, which is why we're using it here, because like I said, it feels like such a smack in the face. It is righteousness
Yeah.
when we think we're more right than the other person. And I can't tell you how many times I've had, and I know I've talked about this before, but there are so many times I have had somebody come in to sessions with me and be talking about their significant other and say, well, they just don't get it. I've been doing all of this spiritual work and I've been doing all the blah, 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 and they just don't have any interest. And I'm so afraid for them. I can't, no, and you laugh, but I've had this conversation. I can't tell you how many times. And I'm afraid for them, or should I hold myself back to wait up for them? And my answer is no need to worry for them and no need to hold yourself back for them, because what could happen. This is just the journey they chose. And one morning they could wake up and they could just totally pole vault right past you in terms
Right.
of there.
Right.
And I've seen it happen. Right. And so you're judging and have this, and you're spending, and think of all the energy. So say it's a spousal relationship or a significant other thing. Think of all the energy we do of saying, oh, no, I want them to be here with me. I want them to be in the same place, and in that guise of, it makes me feel better to have them in the same place because then I feel like I'm more right. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
In the guise of, oh no, I'm worried about them, that they're
Right.
not going to be as, whatever as me, or, as advanced as me. And even the questions of, what happens, like there's so many people talk about, the dimensions splitting off again and blah, blah, blah. And what
What if
happens
they're left behind?
what if they're left behind? And I'm just like, nobody's left behind.
Right.
There's no time. So even if it looked like it was 600,000 years, it doesn't matter, because years are just a creation in linear space that we decided, the ego decided wanted to measure with, right?
Right.
There is no time and space, and we're never apart because that's us anyway. So yeah, I might have this part of my consciousness here and I might have this part of my consciousness there. And it could be a great lesson in in, multidimensionality and like all kinds
True.
of things, There's so many different ways to look at the same thing. And it's a challenge to catch all of it, right? To catch
Right.
all of how we think like that, because we even go down to things like, I don't know. How about, everybody, I'm sure, who's had a partner or has a partner or whatever. Oh, let's have a disagreement about who starred in this movie 20 years ago that we saw. How many years ago? This goes on in my household all the time, right? And then you sit there and you bicker back and forth, and then what do? Oh, I'm gonna IMDb it to because I'm sure
right.
Who's right?
Yep.
It happens all the time. And I most of the time have gotten to the place where I just won't engage. I'll just be like, it is what it is. Okay, fine. Maybe in my timeline, this person was
right. I remember it this way.
Yep. And maybe in your timeline, it was this person. It's fine.
Right.
But most people can't accept that. Right. And then, when you start and you don't realize it, even having conversations, do you remember this? Oh, well, yeah, but I remember it this way.
Right. Right.
And then we take these steps to go and reinforce our perspective and our memory, right? To prove that we're right and they're wrong. I watched a movie over the weekend. Interesting. That just sort of came up, that a friend of ours had recommended, and it was called The Forgotten, right? And it was a movie from a while back with Julianne Moore, and I had never seen it. And it was a really good movie. But what was interesting, so the whole premise of the movie is it's a woman who's lost her 9-year-old son, I think 8 or 9, in a plane crash or whatever. And so in the beginning, she's like having these, like she's still like every day trying to get through every day, right? And then all of a sudden, everybody starts forgetting her son, and evidence of her son just disappears.
Yeah.
And her husband doesn't even acknowledge. And they're all calling her delusional and everything else. And she's like, no, I know he exists, and he has existed. And then she starts to push at it. And it's like this, but because everybody around her is telling her, oh, no, you're wrong. It's a challenge, because most will just shut down and then just say, oh, you're right. I must be wrong. I must be delusional, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Blah.
How can I be the only one who believes this?
Right. Correct. And it was a great movie, because it sort of came out of nowhere, like what all had happened. But so, but it's all this whole, she stayed in her truth, regardless of what everyone around her insisted.
Right.
Everyone, everybody that she even knew, peripherally, nobody remembered her child. It was or any of the children that were in this particular plane crash. It was like a small plane thing. So it was, The Forgotten. So it's a good one to watch. But it goes to show you the power of persuasion. And underneath it all, we believe we have to go with what other people believe or whatever to be right. Right. And how persuasive it is to allow ourselves to change our truth based on what we believe is more right or more wrong. And I can say it that way, or I could say it in the way of that other people tell you is right or wrong, because that's essentially what happens most of the time. Instead of us deciding what is true for me right now, which is much different than what's right or wrong or good or bad or whatever.
Right. And that also takes into consideration that you change and you evolve and you reach new levels of expanded consciousness. So then what's right for you may change. So it's not set in stone. It's not inflexible. And when you look at it, how everything seems to want to be defined right now is an absolute right, an absolute wrong that never changes.
Correct. And when we start having things, so here's all right. So this ties into other things you and I have talked about for years now, right? The creating without context.
Right.
if we can't let go of our individual judgments and righteousness on different things, right, then we will prevent ourselves from creating outside of context, because we're always using context in having a judgment.
Right. Well, and even our endpoint creation that we talk about how you just picture the end and let the universe bring everything together to deliver
Yes.
that to you. But then we sit in judgment of all the steps and oh, but that's not right. And it's like, but that's not what you cared about. What you cared about was that endpoint.
Right. And if we sit and say, one of the commitments that I have made for myself has been, and I open my heart to allow all possibilities in the manifestation of this intended creation. Right.
Right.
And I have to remind myself that. And oh boy, that hit me in the face a couple months ago, like in ways that I just would have never imagined. But I want to say the ego had to struggle through that a little bit. Right. And it was much faster because I had the other voice saying, remember what you've asked for. Remember what you've asked
Right.
for.
Right.
Remember your intention. Remember opening your heart to all possibilities will allow yourself to consider this. Right.
Yep.
And so I feel like that was just a little test drive for what's to come for us collectively. And I believe this is a really important part of that, because had I sat in that judgment and righteousness in that moment, in that situation, it would have been a very different outcome, a very different set of circumstances. And I would have still prevented myself from attaining what I had been looking to attain. So,
and I've been sitting here listening to myself saying, right.
I know.
Right,
I keep
right.
on hearing ourselves say, right. I know.
And so I'm changing that to say, I agree with that.
Yes.
I agree with that. That's right for me. That I agree with that. So, and as we say with everything that we do, it's like, check in with your own guidance, check in with your own, and this is just another perspective.
Yes, because, okay, let me go back to the example I was just giving. Had I actually had that judgment or whatever and shut it down, I would have had another opportunity in another way down the road. Because as we always talked about, we always create multiple ways to attain the same end, the same means, right? Now, unfortunately, as I have learned, most of the time it gets bigger and bigger and bigger till it really hits you in the face, and louder and louder, and more, sort of debilitating until you stop, and urgent, right? To pay attention.
Yeah. Right. That's been my experience as well.
Yeah. So typically when it gets to even the point where it was, it's like, okay, well, maybe we should step back and take a look before we write this off, deny it.
Right.
Throw it away, crumple it up and throw it away. Let's just sit in it. And that's a lot of what we've been talking about. So this ties together a lot of things we've been talking about for a while.
Really does. Instead of just powering through something just to be done.
Yep. Crumpling it up like a piece of paper and throwing it away, saying, wait,
right.
Maybe I should read what's on here. Maybe I should look at the paper, look at the back of it, like it's what else can I look at that I might not if I just discounted it, and because of my judgment, right? And see, so we blind ourselves with that judgment, and we blind ourselves with that righteousness. So it's the first step is to be able to see that within ourselves. I believe in the second step is to look at how we enjoy it and why, because underneath that is putting our own valuation on it. And then the next step beyond that is shifting it to a place of acceptance and letting it go.
Yes. Allowing that expansion of understanding and observation. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That feels really good.
Yeah. Because I have also noticed that even so, like the thing that I said that my little nugget of chocolate that was, came up over the weekend, even though it's there and I'm still like scratching my head as to why does it feel good to still hold on to that, right? It doesn't hold the power. It doesn't hold a lot of power because it's like, well, I see it and I sort of enjoy it but then like I've discovered in shifting the way I've eaten anyway is, well, sometimes it's just like, okay, I look at that piece of chocolate. I'm like, well, I'm really not craving that right now.
Right. Well, and like I said, the circumstances that I found that where I enjoyed my righteousness, it's like seeing it and coming to a place of a different awareness about it. It's like I don't feel so staunch in my position, and I can observe it in a much different way to where I tend to be the only one affected by it versus imposing on others.
I agree with that too.
And
Yeah.
that really shifted some things for me.
Yeah, it does. It helps it helps to tone it way down.
Right.
You know,
Diffuse it a little bit.
yeah, so that you can actually see so you can actually see it. It's almost like seeing through well, and then what I keep on saying is seeing through the matrix, right? You start seeing through the matrix a little more, right?
Seeing it for what it really is.
Yeah, what is this really? What is it here to show me or to be or to exist as or to what is this serving in my intended creations that could
Right.
help to allow that to come together in the way I intend. I mean, that's a very different way of looking at it.
Right. Very different.
Yeah. So
Very and much freer too.
say, oh, how interesting.
Right.
How interesting. So I guess that's what we do for our intention today. Yeah. Like being able to see it. I don't even know what I said before.
Well, awareness and coming to a place of observation.
without letting it drive us. Right.
Yes.
Right. And be able to see, oh, to enable ourselves to see past it and beyond it and what's behind it.
Oh, that's good. That's a good next step.
Yeah, I like that. Let's just start with those two steps.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Because those are pretty big. All right. So y'all know the road. Let's take a deep breath. Close our eyes. Open our hearts as we step out of separation back into oneness and wholeness. And we hold ourselves in the vibration where that is our truth. That is from where we create, exist, and experience. All right. That was interesting. I saw at the beginning, I was like handed a key. It was like this big old, like, like the old fashioned keys with the fancy little round handle. And it was like putting the key in enabled me to see everybody's righteousness or judgments, whatever. But it just started me like I would see, it was interesting. The first thing I saw was being burned at the stake, right? As a witch. It's like then I could really see it as the witch and how right that felt. And then I could see it as the people who burned them at the stake, and I could feel how right that felt. And it was like, and then you could see all those perspectives, and then all of that it just melted away. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then it was like I would put the key in, this other whatever lock, and then like I would see this other like historical thing, and then I would start seeing all the perspectives, and I was like, oh, that's really sort of cool, because then it just brought it together, and then it fell away, and I was like, oh, I like this. And then I just sort of got lost up there. It started spinning like a top, and then it was like it just came into this place, and I don't even know where I went after that.
Yeah, I felt a lot of spinning. Mine was more kind of outer space with just the sound of like what I envision as docking clamps or mooring clamps or whatever, letting go and just being free, and then spinning whichever direction, the thoughts. And I mean, it was almost dizzying remembering how to be propelled that way, but it felt very free.
Yeah, I think that was where I went to after, because then it was like, oh, I could just float away. Yeah, that was nice.
Right.
All right.
Well,
Well,
that's a small topic for today.
I don't know, small topic, very minor things. Everybody's little home play this week is to, be observant to that within yourselves, and the first thing is to step back and say, well, let me admit that I love this.
Yes.
And now let me look at why.
Yes.
And then the third step is, and how do I see beyond it, past it, through it. We get that licked, man.
I'm telling you.
Fun times. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next time. This is Angela Coulter and
There's the Avagnoni
signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.